And then we have the big doozy, which is America's Neptune opposition. So here's where we have the question. Is this going to be a mass awakening, or are we moving into mass psychosis? And the choice is yours. This is a sort of a red pill, blue pill situation. So the US Neptune opposition will take place on and around February 18th of 2022. So this is the beginning of the year. Oppositions, of course, are tense. Neptune is going to reach 22 degrees Pisces, opposing the US's Neptune in Virgo. So the US birth chart has Neptune on the midheaven in Virgo. So this opposition is something that occurs once every 165 years. Neptune was last in Pisces in the late 1850s, leading up to the US Civil War. And then the last conjunction, again, meaning they're joined, marked the start of World War II on September 1st of 1939. So again, I just want to emphasize in part 3, we will be talking about the Pluto return, which happens every 250 years. But right around the same time in February, we have another major transit taking place for America. This is America's birth chart that doesn't happen except for every 165 years. So again, buckle up. And my question, is this a tale of two presidents again, as it was leading up to the Civil War? So the Astro Twins say, as we approach Neptune's second 22-degree visit to Pisces, we look back to the start of the Civil War, which we began in 1861, as Neptune exited Pisces to begin its quest through Aries. In 2025, Neptune will repeat this cycle. So again, we're in 2022, planets are going to be retrograding over these spots and going forward again. So 2022 is definitely the start of a phase that's going to continue to evolve. So remember to think about it in that way. Astrologer Robert Hand said, we used to believe that Saturn was reality and Neptune is illusion. However, we've come to realize that Neptune is reality and Saturn is the illusion that there was one. So here's what G. Edward Griffin in Creature from Jekyll Island has to say about the Civil War. He said, there were powerful forces in Europe that wanted to see America embroiled in a civil war. If she could be split into two hostile countries, there would be less obstacle to European expansion on the North American continent. The issue of slavery was but a ploy. America had become the target in a ruthless game of world economics and politics. And I know that's a big statement that he's making, but again, think of everything we've been talking about and think of where we're at right now and really think about that. And two, America, if its sort of conception was 1776, America was a very young country, just a little babe. So and a very valuable country that had a lot to offer. So it's not out of line to think that there wouldn't be powers that be, especially when the key is control, that would not want to see America split and divided. And again, I only ask you to look around yourself and see this pattern being played out again. And as I talked about in part one, I do believe we are in a ruthless game of world economics and politics right now because of the Saturn Pluto conjunction and all that I talked about in part one. So the astro twins say, given the total nature of the sky is a new type of civil conflict upon us, perhaps one that is both digital and algorithmic, not simply an overt demonstration of military or physical force. To answer this profound question, one that we take great caution in advancing, we must acknowledge and consider the Promethean forces of high technology impacting every sphere of human endeavor, including our monetary system. Now, astrologer Robert Fitzgerald's talking back about the Pisces age. He says, all the religions that grew up in this age of Pisces have been religions of duality, entailing a great cosmic war between good and evil, with our personal souls as the battlefields. The enemy now is Satan, the great cosmic god of evil. And to achieve victory, the struggle is now portrayed as internal and spiritual. So again, even the astro twins are alluding to this war taking place, but as we see with this Piscean energy, and especially with the Jupiter and the Neptune dynamic with the Neptune opposition, this is having to do with our unconscious, our subconscious, our internal and spiritual worlds. So the Piscean age, is it the age of anxiety? Robert Fitzgerald says the internal focus of Pisces turned the old violence of Aries inward to the very heart of society. So the age before the Piscean age, 2100 years ago, again, because we're moving backwards through the zodiac when we're speaking to these ages, we were in Aries, which again was a very war-dominated time in history. And Robert Fitzgerald is suggesting that because we're now in Pisces, we have internalized this violence. And I feel that fear and anxiety is a way that we move this stress inwards. So my question and sort of thought for you all is, was the Cold War the rise of technocracy? So again, at the end of World War II, Saturn and Pluto conjunct, and it was the start of something. It might have been the end of World War II, but a conjunction is always the beginning of something. So was the Cold War the rise of this technocracy? Now, what is a technocracy? Technocracy is the government or control of society or industry by an elite of technical experts. Again, technical experts that no one necessarily voted for. And let me read you this quote. Whenever any person or group of persons in a position of great power and without full knowledge and consent of the public uses such knowledge and methodologies for economic conquest, it must be understood that a state of domestic warfare exists between said person or group of persons and the public. Now, this is taken from Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, which, if you're not familiar with this, Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, the story goes, it was a programming manual written in the early days of the Cold War, and it happened to be found by accident in an IBM copy machine in 1986. That's the story. I don't know, if that's true or not, but regardless, there's this piece of information that's basically, if you read it, and you can go, download it for free online, but it's basically calling for the control of the masses through manipulation, and it compares the human, the masses and how to manipulate the masses, similar to like the flow of electricity and how electric currents work and whatnot. It's an interesting read, whether you believe it's true or not, whatever you think it is, read it, and just read it is what my suggestion would be. Anyways, the goal of this manipulation is to divert people's attention from what's really going on. Pisces. We got a lot of Pisces here. Now, Joseph Stalin said this: America is like a healthy body, and its resistance is threefold: its patriotism, its morality, and its spiritual life. If we can undermine these three areas, America will collapse from within. Was and is that the goal? I think that is a good question to ponder. Now, on YouTube, there's a video called Mass Psychosis: How an Entire Population Becomes Mentally Ill. Again, thank you, my friend Kelly, for sending me this. Carl Jung said, "It is not famine, not earthquakes, not microbes, not cancer, but man himself who is man's greatest danger to man, for the simple reason that there is no adequate protection against psychic epidemics, which are infinitely more devastating than the worst of natural catastrophes." Well, what is a psychic epidemic? When mental illness becomes the norm, not the exception. And I think we only need to look around to see that. So what drives a person mad? From this video, and I highly encourage that you watch it, it's really well done. A person can go mad from excessive use of drugs and alcohol. Again, I talked about this with Pisces. Brain injury and other illnesses, psychogenic triggers such as news, jabby-jabbos, bioweapons, poisons, chemtrails, and heavy metals, or a flood of negative emotions such as fear that drives an individual into a state of panic. And if you're not looking at this photo, I encourage you look at this photo to get an idea of how such things could be accomplished. Why would we allow those things to happen? So Illuminati researcher Fritz Springmeier says, the very life and liberty of humanity requires the unmasking of their deceptions. Honesty is a necessary ingredient for any society to function successfully. Deep breath. Is hope on the way? So we have a Jupiter-Neptune conjunction that will take place on and around April 8th through April 12th of 2022. This conjunction happens every 13 years, the first time to happen in Pisces since 1856. And the last Jupiter-Neptune conjunction was in 2009 at 23 degrees Aquarius. Now, typically, Jupiter-Neptune conjunctions are more of a positive dynamic. However, like I've said before in this talk, it's going to act upon and activate what is there. So it depends on what's there. So let's take a look at this a little bit more deeply. So Nikki Halstead says, are you tired of the same artists and Netflix shows on repeat? Are you a film enthusiast ready for a supercharged year for Hollywood blockbusters? Thankfully, this current pop culture plateau is the drum roll for an out of this world year for the arts and media. Because Jupiter and Neptune are both associated with cultural matters, it's safe to say a pop culture renaissance is underway. Now, the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction at 23 degrees Aquarius in 2009 has the Sabian symbol, which is basically each degree of the zodiac wheel has like an archetypal an archetype attached to each degree in each sign. So 23 degrees Aquarius is a bear sitting down and waving its paw. So Sabian symbols expert James Burgess says, by struggling to gain absolute mastery of our own lower nature, we find that nothing is beyond our capacity. It is pure nonsense to expect to reach high spiritual states without first coming to terms with ordinary life. And that also includes dealing with dark psychological imbalances we have inherited and internalized. So that is very appropriate. And let's look at 2009. Was that a futurist nightmare? We have Lady Gaga here, bloody. I don't even know what was happening. I think that was at the VMAs. She always seems to have blood and like meat associated with her. Is that an agenda? I'll let you decide. And then 2009 was the year at the VMAs that Taylor Swift got interrupted by Kanye when she was accepting her award. And again, it was sort of this bizarre situation. Was it a setup? Was it an act? What is going on with the shapes in Kanye's hair? Is that a message? I'm not sure, I don't know, but here's what was going on in 2009. Again, this was in Aquarius. Let's hope that Pisces is a little bit more loving. Now, here's what the Sabian symbol is for 23 Pisces, which we'll be experiencing in 2022. A materializing medium giving a seance. James Burgess says this, notice how people suffer and live in confusion. Our grasp on the nature of reality is a blend of the intuitive and the taught. And if we want to establish the truth of our unique take on life, then we have to substantiate that what we think or feel is true. So on that note, let's just go back to the character that is Kanye. So Vigilant Citizen wrote this article in 2020. He says, he or she writes, Kanye West exposes dark truths about Kardashians, tries to break away from them. To put things in, this is from that article. to put things in context, we need to go back to 2016 when Kanye was forcefully handcuffed and hospitalized for quote unquote acting erratically. He was placed in 5150 hold, which is California law code for temporary involuntary psychiatric commitment of individuals who present a danger to themselves or others due to signs of mental illness. It should be noted that industry slaves Britney Spears and Amanda Bynes were both placed in 5150 hold at UCLA Medical Center. Now, again, in part one, I spoke about the Britney Spears being a manifestation of the Saturn Uranus squares. She's coming up again here. Now, between the time that I recorded part one and I'm recording this part two, Britney Spears has won her conservator case against her father. And I do believe that her, quote unquote, freedom now will be revealing a lot more than what we've already seen come out from her testimonies. And I'll also note that this article here at the top says, furthermore, several tweets of Kanye's allude to Hollywood's darkest secret, MK Ultra. If you're not familiar with MK Ultra, this is the Wikipedia definition, which I think is pretty accurate as far as my knowledge. MK Ultra was the code name of an illegal human experimentation program designed and undertaken by US CIA. These experiments were intended to develop procedures and identify drugs such as LSD that could be used in interrogations to weaken individuals and force confessions through brainwashing and psychological torture. MK Ultra used numerous methods to manipulate the subject's mental states and brain functions, such as the covert administration of high doses of psychoactive drugs like LSD, other chemicals, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, isolation, verbal and sexual abuse, and other forms of torture. So basically, this is still happening in Hollywood. We're starting to see it come out with the Pluto, all of the dynamics that we've been talking about, Pluto through Capricorn, the squares. But again, this is something that really happened, and it started taking place at the start of the Cold War, at the end of World War II. So I want to make sure that I'm connecting the dots here. Nikki Halstead says, Pisces is the sign associated with the past, dreams, cosmology, and spirituality. Rather than repeating 2009, there will be a renewed compassion from the public at large when reflecting on both the memories and nightmares of this time. 2009, while revolutionary, was a cutthroat and abusive year for those in the limelight. So the point that I'm trying to make by talking about MK Ultra, and again with what we've seen with Britney Spears, is that these are modern day slaves. These are victims. Pisces is about the victim. It's about suffering. And that even though we've been watching a show, we've been watching singing and dancing and, what have you, the reality of the situation was much different than what was being portrayed in the limelight. She goes on to say, the world at large is mourning over a plethora of events and are ultimately looking to heal. It won't be all peaches and cream, but the cultural growth underway will show us, the people, just what we're made of. The key word of this transit is not salvation, but redemption. And I wanted to include the definition of the word redemption because it's so Piscean. The action of saving or being saved from sin, error, or evil. And they use the example, God's plans for the redemption of his world. The other interesting definition right under it, number 2, the action of regaining or gaining possession of something in exchange for payment or clearing a debt. Again, I find that very appropriate, but hopefully you'll see that as something that is uplifting about this time period being one of redemption. And let's hope that is true. And then last thing we'll talk about here is Jupiter's move into into Aries from May 10th until October 27th of 2022. Then it's going to be retrograding back into Pisces, and then we'll move back into Aries, I believe, end of 2022 or beginning of 2023. Now, Jupiter in Aries is about a re-energized sense of self. So this is about Aries. It's about our identities, our personal selves. It is a time of being focused on ourselves as individuals and eager to satisfy the need for happiness. And it's helping us to move beyond our limits to realize the amount of opportunity that is available. Looking back to Jupiter and Aries back around 2010, 2011, we had the rise of the influencers. So I believe Instagram was created when Jupiter was retrograde in Pisces, but it had been in Aries. So there's definitely a connection with, selfies and Instagram and really promoting the self in this time period. And we'll see what this next iteration of that looks like. But if you're looking to do more self-promotion, this could be a great time for that. And I want to close with this idea too. When we're talking about Pisces and Virgo, again, opposites of each other, this is the 6th and the 12th house aspect, Virgo being 6th house, Pisces being 12th. Astrologer Robert Fitzgerald says this: to purify it, meaning spirit and ego, required a spiritual healing to release all of the collective fears, prejudices, and hatreds of humanity. This led to the insane violence of this age, alongside the rise of transcendental religions of belief and salvation. So what is real? What is unreal? And how are they connected? Does the solidity and apparent reality of the physical world require the heartfelt existence of the spiritual in order to exist? So these are deep questions that we are working through internally. And it comes down to this: don't hate, meditate. Robert Fitzgerald says it has been taught in all religions that through meditation and prayer, through humble service, and through moral purity, we open our minds and consciousness to the expansion of Pisces, to contact with heavenly worlds, bliss, and ecstasy. So if we want to get to the light side of Pisces, we have to evolve, and we have to work through all of the shadow sides that we've talked about. So that is the end of part 2. I want to thank you so much for being here with me for part 2. I want to again invite you to this webinar special that I'm offering, a life purpose astrology reading, where you can explore your personality from a soul level. You'll get an understanding of your mission, gifts, and talents in this lifetime, learn how to address and overcome obstacles related to karma, unconscious blocks, and even possibly past lives or family dynamics. All of this can be yours in a 45-minute recorded audio reading that I will do for you and send over to you. Plus, you get a free 30-minute follow-up call with me if you so choose to ask any questions or get any clarification. I'm offering a special of $99 for this. And here's, a testimonial here on the screen. So if you are interested, email me at kristen@kristenavalos.com. Include your date of birth, time of birth, and location of birth, and I will email you your personalized reading within 3 to 7 days of receiving payment. So again, that webinar special is $99. I would love to connect with you and read your chart and get to know you on that level. Don't miss part 3. I will be recording that. I'm still finishing up the slides for that, so it might not be right away. Be sure to watch part 1 if you haven't already. Watch it again. You might gain some new insights. Watch part 2 again. Watch them together. Let me know what your comments are. Share it with anyone you think would be interested in learning more. Like it, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel. You can subscribe to my email list, which is very helpful for me to be able to connect and keep you posted on all of my latest videos and meditations. Thank you again. I look forward to seeing you in part 3. Bye.